This was never a pilgrimage. Let me ask you something. If a religion has power, does it still need faith, or does it only need territory? Because what if Journey to the West wasn't a sacred journey at all? What if it was an expansion plan, a soft invasion, a doctrine delivered like a policy package? And the 4 disciples were never chosen because they were righteous. They were chosen because they were useful. This story doesn't begin with a monk in China. It begins in the West, at Spirit Mountain, at the place where light is supposed to be pure. But in our version, that light isn't purity, it's authority. Spirit Mountain was quiet in the way powerful places are quiet. Not peaceful, organized. Buddha sat at the center, and around him were not saints. They were departments. The eightfold heavenly divisions, heavenly administrators, cosmic civil servants, entities whose job was to keep things running. And that day, they weren't discussing enlightenment. They were discussing the East, the Tang Empire, a human civilization stable enough to outlive most kingdoms, centralized, educated, massive, a place where belief could become infrastructure. Buddha didn't want a few believers, he wanted a root system. So he produced the object of the mission, the 8 heavenly scriptures. In the official story, these are holy texts. In our story, they are blueprints, not how to be good, but how to build a system that reproduces belief, how to place temples near trade routes, how to attach monasteries to imperial legitimacy, how to make charity look like virtue, while also building dependence, how to turn faith into law without calling it law. Now here's the important part. To deliver doctrine into a civilization like Tang, you don't send a warrior, you send a symbol, you send a human face. So they chose Tang Sanzang, but not because he was pure, because he had history. In his previous life, he was Jin Chanzi, a disciple who once questioned the teachings, and that's what makes him perfect. A skeptic who becomes a missionary is the most convincing proof of truth. If even the doubter returns, then the doctrine must be real. So Tang Sanzang was selected, not forgiven, selected. He would carry the narrative. He would represent redemption. He would become the story people could worship. But symbols require protection, because on the road to influence, there are always enemies, bandits, demons, accidents. So Buddha needed a shield. He needed violence, but not random violence, a controlled blade. And the best blade in the world was also the most dangerous one, Sun Wukong. Sun Wukong was not merely strong, he was an unstable truth. He proved the divine order could be challenged. He proved heaven could be humiliated. He proved the individual could win. And systems do not tolerate proof like that. So the solution was clever. Instead of destroying him, they assigned him. They weaponized him. They placed him inside the narrative. A rebel becomes a bodyguard. A wild storm becomes a scheduled service. Then they added 2 more. Bajai was not picked for comic relief. He was picked because he represents desire. And desire is what systems test first. If he breaks, he measures how long a man can resist comfort. Sho Zhang was not picked because he is loyal. He was picked because he is silent. Silence doesn't disrupt narrative. Silence doesn't question policy. Silence makes history easier to write. And lastly, the white dragon. People call him a horse. In our story, he was surveillance. A dragon is near heaven blood, a creature that understands hierarchy, perfect to embed within the team. He doesn't fight often. He watches, he remembers, he reports. So from the beginning, this journey was not free. This journey was monitored. This journey was planned. And then they launched a monk, a monkey, a pig, a silent man, a dragon, carrying doctrine, carrying violence, carrying a mission. And early on, everything worked. The demons appeared. Wukong killed them. Tang Sanzang preached. Villages bowed. Fear made people receptive. This was how it was supposed to go until they noticed something. Something so consistent, it couldn't be coincidence. Because every time a demon fell, someone came to retrieve it, not to punish it, to take it home. And that's where the real story begins. Because once you realize evil has immunity, you start asking who wrote the law. And the moment Sun Wukong started asking that, He became the greatest threat on the road. Episode 2. The Demons with Immunity. There's a kind of evil that can be defeated, and then there's a kind of evil that can't be punished. And if you've ever lived in a world where punishment is selective, you know which one destroys people faster. That's what they discovered. Not a demon problem, a system problem. At first it looked normal. A village cries, a monster appears, people vanish. Sun Wukong shows up, staff in hand, and the demon learns the difference between hunger and consequence. The villagers cheer. Tang Sanzang speaks softly about compassion. The story feels holy. But then the pattern repeats, and repeats, and repeats, until Wukong notices something strange. The demons never fight like desperate criminals. They fight like employees. Like they already know how this ends. Like they already know someone will come. And someone always does. A bodhisattva appears calmly. A celestial official arrives politely. They don't panic. They don't apologize. They smile and say things like, "It was a misunderstanding. It was my disciple. It was my mount. I will bring them back and educate them." Bring them back, not execute them, not punish them. Bring them back. And what about the villagers? Nothing? No resurrection, no compensation, no justice, just silence. Wukong begins pushing. He wants to kill them permanently. Tang Sanzang stops him. Mercy. But in our version, mercy is not compassion, mercy is compliance. Because Tang Sanzang has internalized the mission, reach Chang'an, deliver doctrine. Do not disrupt alliances. He's not evil. He's worse. He believes in the system. This is where the psychological split begins. Tang Sanzang sees the world as a moral test. Wukong sees the world as a political machine. And the more Wukong sees, the less he can tolerate. He begins asking questions. Why does every monster have a backing? Why are civilians disposable? Why does the heavens treat evil like property? At one point, Wukong says nothing. He simply stares at a retreating bodhisattva and whispers, "So they can eat people, as long as they belong to someone." That line changes everything, because once you say it out loud, you can never unsee it. Now we bring in Baji. Jai doesn't revolt like Wukong. He calculates. He watches the same pattern and arrives at a different conclusion. Not, "We must fight harder," but "We will never win." He counts the cost. One village saved today, 2 villages destroyed tomorrow. No demon punished permanently, no celestial being held accountable, and he understands something terrifying. This journey is designed to look righteous, while producing no systemic change. It's a moving stage show, a traveling miracle campaign, a PR tour. And Baji, for all his laziness, has one brutal talent. He knows when effort is being harvested, when your suffering is being used as fuel for someone else's narrative. So Baji starts refusing. He delays. He complains louder. He stops running into danger first. Tang Sanzang scolds him. Wukong threatens him. But Baji doesn't become better. He becomes honest. He says, "We're not heroes. We're cleaning up their mess." And for a moment, nobody replies. Because it's true. Then comes Sha Wujing. Sha Wujing is the most tragic because he doesn't argue. He just fades. He watches Wukong fight again and again. He watches Tang Sanzang insist on mercy again and again. He watches Baji collapse into survivalism. And he decides the safest way to exist is to stop existing as a person. So he returns to the flowing sand river. He doesn't announce it. He doesn't dramatize it. He simply disappears into his origin, as if saying, "If justice is impossible, I will become a place where nothing matters." Now the team is broken. No longer 4 disciples, just 2, the believer and the rebel. Tang Sanzang keeps walking because he has a mission. Wukong keeps walking because he has a conscience. And conscience in a corrupt system is not a virtue. It's an accident waiting to be erased. Because if demons have immunity, then someone benefits from their crimes. And if someone benefits, then this was never random. Episode 3, The Deal with Heaven. Heaven does not fear monsters. Heaven fears instability. And there is no instability more dangerous than a hero who asks the wrong question. Sun Wukong was not dangerous because he could fight. He was dangerous because he could expose. Because the moment he understood backing, he understood structure. And when you understand structure, you stop fearing gods. That is unforgivable. The Jade Court began receiving reports, not of a demon problem, but of a narrative problem. A monkey is questioning celestial authority. A monkey is killing assets. A monkey is refusing retrieval orders. A monkey is saying the quiet part out loud. It wasn't rebellion, it was worse. It was moral clarity. Because moral clarity makes people compare, and comparison destroys legitimacy. So heaven did what systems do. It negotiated, not with Wukong, with Buddha. Because Buddha was the sponsor of the mission, and heaven knew something important. Buddha wanted influence in Tang, but he needed heaven's cooperation. You can't colonize a civilization if the existing divine order blocks you. So heaven delivered an offer. Your monk reaches Chang'an safely. We guarantee the political success of this transmission, but Sun Wukong must be removed. Not publicly killed, not martyr-made, removed quietly, erased from the official record. The kind of removal that makes future generations say, maybe he was never that important. And Buddha agreed, because in the calculus of institutions, one uncontrollable warrior is cheaper than losing an empire's belief system. So they wrote the plan, and they needed a trigger. They needed an internal collapse. They needed something that would separate the team and isolate Wukong. That's where the White Dragon enters. White Dragon had been observing quietly. He had been logging patterns, not in paper, in memory, in celestial transmission. But he began noticing inconsistencies. Demons knew too much. Ambushes were too well timed. Backings appeared too quickly, as if someone higher was coordinating the route. The dragon realized this road wasn't dangerous by chance. It was dangerous by design. And he tried to send a signal, not necessarily to rebel, but to warn, to request clarification. And that was enough, because when surveillance becomes conscience, it must be destroyed. But it couldn't be destroyed openly, so they staged it. A demon attack, a sudden strike, a chaos that could be blamed on evil. The White Dragon fought. He was wounded badly, and he fell into a ravine. Not just physically, symbolically. The supervisor was gone. Now only the believer and the rebel remain. And Tang Sanzang watched him fall and did not turn back. He said something that sounded holy. All beings have karma, but Wukong heard something else. Accept the loss. Continue the mission. And this is the moment the monk becomes terrifying, not because he is cruel, but because he can justify cruelty with doctrine. That is the most dangerous kind of person to have in power. Now the trap closes. Heaven seals the sky. Buddha seals causality. They create a zone where Wukong's instincts will work against him. And then they use the final component, distraction. The monk delays Wukong, not necessarily on purpose, but because he believes the mission matters more than any one being. He speaks of compassion, he speaks of greater good, he speaks of destiny, and those words in that moment function like chains. They slow Wukong. They keep him in place long enough for the mountain to fall. When the five-finger mountain descends, it isn't punishment, it's censorship. It's a lid placed over a truth that should not breathe. Wukong looks up. He sees Buddha's face, calm. He sees heaven watching from above, relieved. And he sees Tang Sanzang, not weeping, not fighting, just standing there. Wukong realizes something quietly. This was never his journey. This was never about justice. This was about successful delivery. The mountain falls, and history begins rewriting itself instantly. Because if you can bury a rebel under stone, you can build a religion on top of him. Episode 4, The Imperial Brother. The strangest thing about betrayal is this. It doesn't always look like cruelty. Sometimes it looks like peace. Tang Sanzang arrived in Chang'an carrying the 8 heavenly scriptures, alone. No 4 disciples, no dragon horse, no heroic entourage, just a monk in clean robes and a story carefully edited. The emperor welcomed him like a miracle, because the Tang Empire loves stability. and nothing stabilizes a population like a sacred narrative. Tang San Sang spoke in the palace. He spoke of suffering. He spoke of salvation. He spoke of the West. And the emperor listened, not like a student, but like a ruler evaluating a tool. Doctrine has value. It teaches obedience. It teaches patience. It teaches that injustice is karma. It teaches that suffering is meaningful. An empire loves that. Temples were built. Titles were granted. The monk became imperial brother. The scriptures were translated and formalized. And this is where your story gets darker. Because the moment doctrine becomes state-approved, it stops being faith. It becomes policy. The same way law spreads, quietly, in signage, in rituals, in education, in funeral rites, in marriage traditions. Until one day you don't believe because you chose to, you believe because your entire society is built around it. Tang San Sang lived in comfort, and he never spoke the full truth of the road. He praised the mission, he minimized the cost, he never named the demons as immune. He never said they had backing. He never said they were retrieved. Because if he did, the emperor would ask, so heaven allows this? And then doctrine loses its shine, so the monk remains silent. And that silence became the foundation of a new moral order. But there were consequences. At night, Tang San Sang dreamed, not of demons, not of glory, of eyes beneath stone, not rage, not accusation, just waiting. And the monk would wake up in cold sweat, whispering, this was necessary. He repeated it like prayer. He repeated it like self-defense. Because deep down, he knew something awful. He wasn't chosen because he was good. He was chosen because he could accept compromise. And that is why the mission succeeded. Years passed. He died honored. The emperor mourned. The temples remained. The doctrine rooted itself. The story became official history. And in official history, Sun Wukong becomes an early chapter, a tool, a footnote, a lesson. But you can't bury a being like Wukong forever. Not completely, because stone doesn't kill truth, stone delays it. And when stone finally cracks, the world doesn't get a rebel, it gets silence made into violence. Episode 5, 500 Years of Silence. 500 years. That's not prison, that's rewriting time. Under the five-finger mountain, Sun Wukong did not rot. He refined. He listened to the world above. He heard pilgrims speak his name incorrectly. He heard monks tell stories where he was tamed. He heard children laugh at the idea of the Monkey King, as if he were just a character, a cartoon, a myth. He realized the system had won a second victory, not just defeating him, but turning him into entertainment. He waited, not for rescue, for fracture, and the fracture finally came. A shift in heavenly balance, a loosened seal, a crack in the mountain, and Wukong rose, not roaring, not celebrating, just standing, like a storm that no longer needs thunder. He went straight to heaven. And what he did there was not conquest, it was interrogation. He shattered celestial halls. He broke formations. He dismantled false authority. But he did not seize a throne, because he didn't want control. He wanted accountability. And that is precisely what terrifies systems. Because systems can survive conquest, but they cannot survive moral questions. The Jade Court panicked. They remembered the first time. They remembered humiliation. But this time was worse, because Wukong no longer wanted recognition. He no longer wanted a title. He wanted them to admit what they were, and they could not. So they used the oldest weapon. Not blades, not armies. Relationships. They approached Pig and Sand again. They did not threaten them first. They offered them hope. To Baji, human form restored, rank restored, dignity restored. To Sha Wujing, a return to position, a place in hierarchy, the chance to stop being discarded. And then the condition, kill Sun Wukong. Not capture, kill. Here is the sick genius of it. They didn't want to defeat Wukong. They wanted to prove something to the world. That even rebellion collapses under survival. That even brotherhood breaks under benefits. That the system doesn't need to kill you. It only needs to make your people choose against you. And when Baji and Sha Wujing accepted, it wasn't because they were evil. It was because they were tired, because they had already tried leaving once, because they had already learned the lesson. No one escapes the framework, so the final battle was set, not hero versus villain, but brother versus brother. And the most tragic part was that heaven would call it restoring order. Episode 6, the stone that refused to be used. When they met again, there was no dramatic speech, because the truth didn't need words. Baji looked away. Sha Wujing stood like a wall, and Wukong understood immediately. He didn't ask why. He already knew. Heaven didn't force them with chains. Heaven offered them something worse. A reason to betray. The fight was brutal but not flashy, because Wukong wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting with a strange restraint. He avoided killing blows at first, not because he couldn't, because some part of him still hoped that brotherhood could resist structure. But structure is patient, and structure always pays well. In the end, Wukong survived, but he lost something else, not flesh, meaning. Because if the people you protected will kill you to survive, then what is justice? What is loyalty? What is the point of strength? He could have destroyed heaven. Maybe he could have shattered the Jade Court entirely. But he understood something deeper now. If you destroy the palace, the system rebuilds elsewhere. If you kill the officials, new ones take their place. Because the problem was never one ruler, it was design. So Wukong did something no conqueror does. He walked away. He returned to the only being who never belonged to heaven's bureaucracy, his first teacher, Puti Zushi. And he didn't ask for power. He asked for explanation. And the master asked him one question: do you want victory or freedom? That question is a blade, because victory is endless war. Freedom is leaving the battlefield, Wukong thought. Then he answered quietly, I don't want to be anyone's tool. So he sealed his cultivation, not defeat, refusal. He took the Ruyi Jingu Bang and threw it into the Eastern Sea. The weapon that once shattered heaven became the stabilizing pillar of the ocean. The irony was perfect. The system takes everything, even your rebellion, and converts it into infrastructure. Wukong returned to Flowerfruit Mountain. He did not train warriors. He did not teach rebellion. He taught his monkeys how to live quietly, how to gather fruit, how to hide from storms, how to be small enough that heaven forgets you, because being forgotten was the only remaining freedom. And one day at the mountain peak, he sat down. No speech, no announcement, just silence. And slowly, his body hardened, his breath disappeared, his eyes became stone. He became what he was at the beginning, a rock, a truth that could not be negotiated, a story that refused to be used. Stone gave birth to rebellion, rebellion returned to stone, and the loop closed. They called it a pilgrimage. It was expansion. They called it salvation. It was consolidation. They called it enlightenment. It was assimilation. And in the end, the only one who was truly free chose to become stone.